Starting January 1st, employers in Ontario with more than 25 staff will be required to include expected compensation on publicly listed job postings. Our guest says including these pay details in the job description helps job seekers and employers save time negotiating compensation. Let's get more from David King, Senior Managing Director at Robert Half. Thanks very much for joining us. Can you remind, BC did this a few years ago, a couple of years ago, and Ontario is now doing it. Why are these provinces making this change?
That's right, yeah, and thanks for having me today to discuss the topic. It is indeed the case that BC went this way just a couple of years ago, and now Ontario in January. The need to be transparent when it comes to what opportunities will pay an organization does allow for efficiency in the employment process. What we'll see is that people who are interested in those roles will take the guesswork out of what they had to pay and what they will earn in those opportunities. And then for organizations, likewise, they're able to attract the right talent because they're very transparent about what they can expect to pay them for the job they're about to do.
That's interesting. I mean, and I must admit, say I'm shopping online. If a thing doesn't give a price, I'm clicking elsewhere. And that's going to be similar with jobs, isn't it? If you don't have a salary range, you're going to be inclined to move on.
Absolutely. I think that in the past, it was somewhat secretive as to what opportunities would pay. And it would become one of the biggest contentious points in the actual interview process, getting to an agreed number. That obviously does create internal problems as well for organizations when there are inequities that exist about what different employees are making for pretty similar work. And of course, creates competitiveness in the marketplace when organizations are paying different for, again, similar work being done.
So apparently they want to promote workplace fairness and accountability, and they want to reduce systemic wage gaps. But it must be, some employers are going to be annoyed, aren't they? They may hope to pay low wages, but it'll be harder for them to get away with it.
Yeah, I think history would suggest that there are cases and employers are trying to create an opportunity to have a very engaged and productive workforce while having to be mindful of what the spot price of labor would be. There certainly will be some organizations in the future that will have to, in the short term, reflect on any inequities that they have with regard to what they're paying historically and what the market expects. Clearly, with the transparency around compensation, you can no longer hide behind a number that isn't transparent to the market. With everybody knowing what you're about to pay, it will definitely either include great candidates because you're paying on market or exclude great candidates because you're trying not to pay on market.
But of course, existing employees will see the ad and say, well, why am I not being paid this?
Absolutely. Yeah, as soon as you post a role that has a potential job quality and value attached by way of compensation, the internal analysis will quickly take place. And so companies will have to be mindful of that. And we're certainly encouraging organizations to go through that type of internal reconciliation now ahead of the legislation to be prepared when those positions get posted publicly.
Can you give us any indication as to what happened in BC after they introduced the change?
Well, what happened with regard to the labor market increasing with regard to spot price of labor, there wasn't anything really material to suggest there. However, it certainly does help create that fairness and equity amongst positions in the labor market in that province. It also does help create a sense of trust with the organizations and leadership because they're no longer trying to hide behind a number. It is a very transparent exchange of a contract to suggest that for the work we're asking you to do, here's what we're about to pay you. And so I think there have been ancillary benefits in the market, but no study would suggest that the actual price of labor has gone materially in one direction or another because of the legislation.
They also, Ontario's bringing in a thing that would prohibit a Canadian experience requirement. And apparently this is aimed at opening doors for internationally trained professionals.
It's meant to create objectivity around what the job actually requires to be done and if you have the skills to do that, excluding any detail around where those skills may have been gained, whether it be in a Canadian opportunity or elsewhere. So it does take away the inequity that potentially could occur if an employer was suggesting there was a preference of which country that experience would have been gained in, therefore creating more objectivity and, again, more equitableness amongst the labor market.
Interesting change here that employers will have to, if they interview someone, they have to get back to the person within 45 days to say whether a decision is made. There's a lot of companies don't even bother. They're behind getting back to candidates even after interviewing them.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really happens on both sides. Sometimes you will see candidates who are no longer interested and simply disappear from
Yes.
the process. And you also see clients who do the same thing. So the requirement now for a 45-day window by which a company has to follow up with anyone who they've interviewed to provide direction on what happens next, whether they got the opportunity or not, and to document all of that process, both the interview process as well as the follow-up process. So this is creating more documentation and oversight requirements for HR functions in organizations.
And they have to disclose to the candidates that AI may be used in vetting applications.
Yeah, we certainly see organizations today, especially if there's a large volume of response to a potential opportunity, to use AI to vet based upon keywords that are required for the role that they're looking to fill. And so if this is happening, it now will need to be disclosed as well to any potential candidates that AI is being leveraged in the vetting process.
There's kind of a technology war going on because applicants are using AI as well to bombard. I think some applicants are just mass mailing out applications using AI.
Absolutely. And what we are seeing as a result of that is a lot of organizations are now suggesting in-person interviews are coming back in vogue, making sure that they can properly assess for themselves in the flesh exactly who they potentially are hiring, so that there's no concern that AI has played a material role either on the employer or the employee side of that engagement.
David, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
David King, Senior Managing Director at Robert Half.